My name is Donald, and Shestin is my wife, and we live in Moseley in Birmingham. And I'm so deeply grateful for those who've made this link with you all in the conference in St. Martin-in-the-Fields possible. Again, you've made possible the paradox of being absent yet present, and that's a living reality, and I'm so grateful. Fiona's invitation is to respond to a series of questions, including, do our stories tell us something of God's story? Are we living theology? And I want to respond to Fiona's question by exploring a somewhat messy, scary, wondrous mystery. Strength in weakness, living within that paradox. Most of us need friends whom we trust enough to be real and to be honest in the sharing of our stories and all those inner stories that are woven within our stories. And some of us need mentors who help us to grow within accepting this paradox. And we're not alone in our weakness, and we need each other's openness and love. Let me tell you about two people who I love and who confront me. Kjell is Shestin's cousin, and Ingela is his wife, and they live in Shestin's home village in central Sweden. Kjell was a social worker until in his early 40s he developed Parkinson's disease. Ingela, his wife, is a physiotherapist. She's strong, but she also knows her own weakness, and she's based in a nearby hospital. After 20 years, Kjell continues to express the deep things within him through painting, and he makes an awful mess at times, through writing poetry, astonishingly vibrant poetry, and through singing. He's the one who sings "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Been Through, Nobody Knows But Jesus," and all kinds of people melt when Kjell sings that. And Ingela, she finds herself when she gets lost in the garden, and in the winter she skis on her own in the forests. Together they are learning the interplay of strength and weakness in their relationship, in their learning to love each other, honouring each other's needs, and learning a complex interdependence. Ingela asked, why is it that Kjell only discovered such creativity when he became so ill? And Kjell asks, must we break? Must we crash in order to begin to understand the secrets of our inner being and the strength in our weakness? Does something have to break to make the sky blue? He's written a wonderful song about blue skies. He calls it Blue Heaven, and again we all become tearful when he sings that. I'm learning that the mystery of our humanity lies within this paradox, not weakness or strength, but rather the essential interplay of both within whom we are as human beings, within our relationships, and within our communities. I love the writing of Gillian Rosen. She wrote once about the curious alchemy of risk and hope and struggle, and the growing in love while remaining vulnerable and woundable. Some of you have lived the strength, weakness, paradox all your lives, whilst other of us have come to it late, and we've stumbled into it without map or compass or vocabulary. And some of you are carers, assistants, who are strong for our sakes. How to honour the weakness that also lies within you. For reasons which you may understand, I've had to struggle to find and to craft words for this paradox, and in the process I've almost given up, but I haven't. So where to begin? I begin with my own context, which continues to have huge implications for Sheshtin. As some of you know, I've lived with a serious spinal condition and chronic pain for over 20 years. I depend on my wonderful large gravity chair to support my body following 3 spinal operations. It needs to be moved from room to room and from place to place, in and out of the car. I wonder how long we can carry on doing that. In recent years there have been 2 further periods in hospital, one for a bypass in my left leg leading to a fasciotomy, a long wound remaining opening for nearly 4 months, with the district nurses coming in every day and teaching me the miracle of the human body and the way it heals itself. The other period in hospital came about 4 years later, this time landing up in a dementia ward after becoming delirious during the onset of pneumonia. And within all that lot, there was a time when they thought I got a cancerous lump under my arm, and we went through crazy processes of going to and fro and sitting in clinics and just holding on, or being held and holding on. At times, and within a variety of circumstances and encounters, I experienced anxiety and fear and utter rage, and also of being out of control. At times I questioned if I possessed the energy and the will to continue to live through a process with so many undercurrents, and to live it wherever it might lead. And yet it was within all this messy turmoil, within all this insecurity, that my world just cracked open. And it was as though life broke through. And it was in the letting go of the things that sometimes helped me to manage my life, or that's what I thought. Those things that I thought I was strong in. It was when I began to let go some of these things that I discovered a kind of hidden inner release, an unseen movement. I think some of you will know what I'm talking about. I hope so. And a friend wrote in a letter to me, a Finnish friend, in our fight for survival, with our utmost physical weakness, our vulnerability and dependency on others, our inner strength is activated. Now this is the terrain I want to explore, and to do so honestly, without cliches, naivety, or retrospective romanticism. What I share emerges within a looking back into blurred memories of what at times has been raw and at times has been desolate. My search for meaning belongs within a particular framework of interpretation. My search for words, as I've said to you, has been a struggle, so much so that I've almost given up. But I take heart in some words from Thomas Merton, who means a lot to me, a Cistercian monk and a prolific writer. He wrote, "Do not be one of those who, rather than risk failure, never attempts anything. So I'm going to risk failure. Each of us reaches our own liminal place via different circumstances. Each of us finds our own images and we clothe them with our own words. And this is my way, and I hope there are enough resonances. My image is, and I've got a picture on the wall here of it. It's of a terrain, a raw yet green terrain with distant mountains and what lies beyond. That Shell did that painting, and oh, does it inspire me. Sherston didn't want it in the house. I love it. I see myself as inhabiting the foothills, and within the foothills, as if for the first time, I begin to see vistas I've never seen before. I begin to see familiar things quite differently, sometimes shockingly differently. And I have begun to experience what I can only call an inner realignment, and begin to inhabit new depths in my humanity. And I'm learning the power of being and the beingness of things and the beingness of people. And I'm reclaiming my name, my identity. When in hospital, I had a band around my arm which had my name on it. And when I go to a clinic, they call my name. And I'm beginning to discover an inner freedom, playfulness, an openness which sometimes surprises and embarrasses and shocks other people. And I surprise myself as well at times. And I'm learning to fly. Somebody came to me, visited me in this room once and said, "How are you, Donald?" And I said, "Malcolm, I'm learning to fly." "Oh," he said. And he gave me a wonderful picture of two marsh harriers that's on the window screen over there with dark clouds, but the marsh harriers are lifted by the winds. So I'm learning to fly, but I'm also learning to crash land. I've joined the truth seekers rather than the truth possessors. And I'm slowly discovering fresh focus and directness and straightforwardness. An Indian friend of mine says, "Oh, you English, you don't know what straightforwardness is." And Israel Selvanagam is teaching me the virtue of straightforwardness. And I'm learning the strength to be weak, and the strength to be gentle, and strength to let tears flow and stay in my face and not to wipe them away. And I'm discovering that fears can be named and they can be traced to their source. They can be traced and they can be faced, and that we need no longer be prisoners of fear. In my continuing physical and emotional limitation, I'm learning to let go some of my old ways of trying to manage, and I'm slowly finding new ways with help. I have a very stern 25-year-old physio who says, "Donald, you must be gentle in these exercises." I said, "I don't do gentle." She says, "Well, Donald, you're going to learn to do gentle, because if you don't learn to do gentle, you're going to undo all the good work that the surgeon has done." She's could be my granddaughter, and she speaks with such authority. I'm encountering an unfamiliar yet resonant solidarity, unexpected companionships, and surprising sense of communion. And I'm discovering the God of life in life. That shouldn't be a surprise, but I am. And I'm learning that God has made my sometimes painful body God's own dwelling place and home. My own homecoming has synchronized with the sense that God made God's home there before I did. And I'm experiencing more wonder and gratitude and joy and humour, and I gaze and ponder more, I laugh and cry more, and I cry and laugh more, and I look over the back garden, and our back garden is like an aerodrome with big birds, small birds coming in, flying, landing. It's such a... I could sit there for ages. I'm held, but I'm not protected. And I'm encountering angels in many different forms. I could tell you stories about that, but perhaps I haven't got time. But you can tell your own stories. But I have discovered, all these years of my life, I discovered that it was the end of the wilderness period that an angel came and ministered to Jesus. I never noticed that. And in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he said, "Please, Lord, take this cup away from me," an angel came and strengthened him. Now, I never noticed that. Sometimes we go out here and lugging the chair inside, and a young Muslim lad will come up and say, "Can I help you with your chair?" And he carries it in, and I say, "Has anybody ever called you an angel?" And he laughs and smiles. I'm startled and at times almost overwhelmed by encounters with the weakness and strength and paradox emerging as a blood-stained watermark in the wounds and the blessings of our times. 400,000 Rohingya Muslims, refugees fleeing from Myanmar into Bangladesh, women and children walking for day after day in desperate need of food, of shelter, of clean water, of medical aid, injured and exhausted. What inner strength, what resilience, what resolve, what determination within their physical weakness do they somehow find to keep them going? And where does it come from? And closer to home, similar weakness, strength, watermarks among the victims of Grenfell Tower in Notting Hill, where we once lived and worked for 10 years. Grenfell Tower was a few hundred yards from our church. It was built when we were there. And I've watched some of these extraordinary people being interviewed on television, Newsnight, Channel 4. And within the devastation and the desolation, the grieving and the outrage, among some of them, astonishing insight, measured wisdom, deep resolve before the forthcoming public inquiry. And they're carrying on, and their determination to find a life, and they're having found each other. Increasingly, I also wonder about the connections between our own bewildering yet wonderful experiences. Can all this terrain that I've been trying to enunciate for you, can it be the terrain where God's Spirit strengthens within the weakness, not just of us, but of humanity? These people who search for water, search for a homeland, and who cross Europe, walking, staying in refugee camps, humiliation, they just keep on and on and on and on. And dare we make links of all this experience to that of Paul's testimony: when I am weak, then I am strong. He says God's power is most fully known in weakness. I find that a very scary mystery. And God chooses what is weak in the world to shame the strong. Then he testifies to Christ crucified as the power of God and as the wisdom of God. Dare we link ourselves with all that mystery? divine nature revealed in what the world regards as folly? And can it be true that through our experience of weakness, we are being drawn into the fundamental paradox of the Christian gospel? John Hull, whom some of you know well, and I also, spoke of the disabled as prophets of weakness. What a label. I want to close with a poem that somebody sent me in the middle of all my turmoil. I don't know who it was. And every time I read it, it moves me more deep. It needs to be read, needs to be spoken, not read. It was written by a 13th century mystic whose name I don't know. This is what he wrote. There is a brokenness out of which comes the unbroken, a shatteredness out of which blooms the unshatterable. There is a sorrow beyond all grief which leads to joy and a fragility out of whose depths emerges strength. And there's a vast space, too vast for words, through which we pass with each loss, out of whose darkness we are sanctioned into being. And there's a cry deeper than sound, whose serrated edges cut the heart as we break open to a place inside which is unbreakable and whole, while learning to sing. I love that last line, while learning to sing. And somewhere in my memory I've got a half-remembered prayer: Lord, help us to embrace our weakness as our greatest strength. And I leave you with two questions amongst the many. How to form congregations where we're strong enough to bring our weakness, open enough to bring our different experiences of pain, and courageous enough to recognize that these could be transforming gifts. Then I remind you finally of Shell's question: must we break? Must we crash in order to understand the secrets of our inner being and the strength of our weakness? Does something have to break to make the sky blue? Oh, I wish I could be with you as you mix and meet and talk. And I promise you I'll be thinking about you, and I'll light a candle at both ends. And I'm so glad that Bob and Fiona are here, and Fiona's knitting away. Bye.